The Adventures of Batman was the first ever animated Batman series, and it's definitely a product of its time, and more importantly, a product of the producers. Being as it was a filmation show, that easily ensured janky animation, a lot of still images, the same 3 to 4 voice actors performing every role in an episode, and reused frames in animation. Oh boy, are there reused animations. Did you like this shot of Robin throwing a batarang? Or this scene with Batman and Robin driving around in the Batmobile? Well, I sure hope you did, because you'll be seeing it at least once an episode. How about this image of the Joker laughing? Well, don't worry, because you'll see it all the time, even when the character isn't supposed to be laughing. I could honestly spend the whole video just talking about this and all that was recycled, because it's pretty noticeable. Episode to episode, it's just an animation recap of something you've already seen before, but now presented with a different story behind it, which doesn't exactly make binge-watching it all that appealing. Granted, this show came out before binge-watching would ever be a concept, would ever be a thought to somebody, but if you had the memory of a goldfish, you could still tell where corners were cut. And sure, there were a lot of limitations in animation in 1968. But a lot of these issues weren't due to those limitations, they were due to cost-saving measures. It was kind of the filmation formula at the time. But because such little attention was put into the actual animation, it led to a lot of errors. The characters are just carelessly placed over backgrounds, a lot of the time pretty poorly. Like, look at this, the perspective is all kinds of off here. You could honestly probably find an animation goof every 12 seconds. 1 minute a detail on the character's clothing will go missing, and the next Batman's eyes won't be colored in properly. These aren't exactly far and few between, there's too many to list here. But despite all of that, and actually in part because of it, I think this show has some real charm. You know, if you could get past the seizure that the opening credits put you in. I mean, really, that's kind of intense. I had to squint to watch it, and even then so, it was still pretty hard on the eyes. This show was clearly meant to be a spiritual successor to the 1966 live-action Batman series, which it very blatantly takes a lot of cues from. The show's narrator teasing cliffhangers, the constant bat transition in between scenes. Even the show's voice actors sound like they're doing soft impersonations of the actors from that show, with some being more blatant than others. The show wore its inspiration on its sleeve. So much so that allegedly at one point in time, an ABC logo was placed on a wall in the background of a shot to pay homage to that previous series and the channel it played on. But when this was found out by CBS, the channel on which this show aired, they made the animators take it out after the initial airing. And if that story is true, that is more effort that was put into the animation than ever before. The characters chosen to grace this small-budget, small-screen adaptation were also the characters of that original show, including original characters from that original show. You have Chief O'Hara being referenced, and characters who were drastically recreated on or because of the 66 series were also inclusions in this installment. Batgirl appears as Commissioner Gordon's daughter, as she did on that first show, and Mr. Freeze appears as Mr. Freeze, whereas previously this character had been referred to as Mr. Zero. That was a change that the 66 show made. The one major difference here is that the characters, for the most part, seem to have taken on a more closer likeness to their comic book counterparts. I mean, some of these designs don't look too dissimilar from their live-action actors at the time. Sure, the Penguin's a little shorter and fatter, but he's mostly the same guy. Mr. Freeze has got the costume from the comics, but he's still wearing the much more suiting colors of the 1960s show. Then you have characters like Commissioner Gordon, who look completely redesigned from the ground up. And characters like the Joker and Alfred, who seamlessly transition from on-page to on-screen. But you also have worst-case scenarios, like green jumpsuit Catwoman. You know the man meme that everyone seems to love? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present you Woman. Hold the cat. There is nothing cat-like to her character outside of her moniker. And I know that this was a costume from the comics at a time, but it was a very short-lived period of time for very good reason. The episodes were comprised of 2 12-minute mini-adventures, which would see the dynamic duo take on whatever nefarious knave or fiendish foe they had to deal with that week. They're usually short, sweet, and to the point stories. And the show itself was pretty much the same thing, as it only lasted 17 episodes. In terms of voice actors, this Batman and Robin were pretty iconic in their own right. I think it's a shame that they're not brought up more often when talking about depictions of the dynamic duo. They would have a lot of longevity in these roles as well, playing the parts again in the Super Friends show and the many variations that came from it, and once again in the new Scooby-Doo adventures, both of which I believe are probably a little bit more fondly remembered than this actual show, which seems to have mostly been forgotten in spite of its historic status. Additionally, I think the Batgirl in this is well cast and well designed as well. I actually happen to really appreciate all of these classic costumes. I don't know if any of them are my favorite, but I can't help but have a fondness for each of them. Unlike the heroes, the villains on this show are mostly pretty forgettable. The show typically recycles the same 4 or 5 rogues ad nauseum. The Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, Catwoman, Mr. Freeze. Sometimes they'll try to spice things up and team 2 of them together, but that only does so much, and they don't really leave all that much of an impression, all things considered. It definitely doesn't help matters that they're all sharing the same voice actors, and those voice actors seem like they're just doing their best to mask their own cadence and differentiate their voice, rather than finding a fitting voice for the character that they're portraying. And it's like that for the first half of the season. But then the show starts surprising you, giving audiences the first on-screen appearances of characters like the Scarecrow, the Mad Hatter, Dollman, Simon the Pieman. We'll get into those last 2 in a second, but focusing on the first 2, it's kind of surprising to me that these villains were actually brought in during Batman's on-screen infancy. Because these are typically villains who don't get a whole lot of screen time, all things considered. There is not enough Scarecrow and Mad Hatter stories in moving media, which is really sad because these are characters that have lent to very famous and very interesting stories in the comics. Now as for the other 2 characters, the Dollman is an actual character from the comics, except that this Dollman isn't actually an adaptation of that character, but rather a completely different character, being a reimagining of the rogue Puppet Master. And Simon the Pieman is an all-original character who is an evil chef crime boss. Sal Maroni, eat your heart out, because it's going to be served to you with a side order of pie. To make matters worse, for some reason, he also uses a Simon Says catchphrase. I don't know, I just think this guy's doing too much and none of it is good. But it's also right at home for this time period and the show that it's on. Batman villains back in the day were always odd one-note jokes that had an extended stay way past their welcome. And Simon the Pieman is no different, as this is a character who makes more than one appearance on the show. Because I don't know, I guess people don't like learning from their mistakes. The show is absolutely insane, and on occasion, provides some very bizarre and laughable visuals. Like face masks that are used to perfectly protect someone's true identity, which surprisingly would be an element of the mythos that would later go on to be used by Batman the Animated Series. I don't know, a little too goofy for my liking. One of my favorite tropes in this has to be that every Batman villain has an army of henchmen who dress in complementary costumes. I mean, that's loyalty and dedication you just can't buy. These are guys who just love their job. But it offers you sights that you might not expect in a Batman show. Like Batman whipping a lion in the middle of a city street, or an Alice in Wonderland cosplay party being ruined by DC's greatest heroes, or Mr. Freeze disguising himself as Santa Claus, or Simon the Pieman disguising himself as Mother Goose, twice, and the Bat family actually being confused by his transformation, despite the fact he used the same exact disguise with a different alias in the past. Oh, is that not enough for you? Well, that's okay, we also have radioactive cats, the Joker becoming a pirate, and this. Whatever this is, I'm not too sure. I can't go into detail about what it is that I'm seeing because I don't want to get demonetized. I can't go into detail about this that I'm seeing because I don't want to be demonetized, but it seems like something that a particular older audience would enjoy. These are just some things that might catch you off guard when going into this. There's more, believe me. The stories are as wacky as you can imagine. with Penguin trying to expose Bruce Wayne and Batman as being the same person because he found out that they share the same birthday, Robin saving a man from drowning only for that man to switch out his utility belt when he wasn't looking, the Joker becoming the mayor of Gotham City, Viking Mr. Freeze, and dolls who are made to commit crimes. All that and more happens in 17 episodes. If you're a Batman aficionado, I think you have to check the series out. It's the first of its kind. It's where the history of animated Batman starts. And I think if you're a parent and you have a child you want to show the character to, this would probably be the most age-appropriate place to start. But if you're just a casual fan, you could probably skip this. Besides, it's not like this has anything that other Batman shows haven't recreated. As a matter of fact, there was another Batman show that pretty much directly recreated this, except it did it in a much more odd and outlandish way, including even more odd and outlandish characters. And if you like this video and would be interested in hearing me talk about that show, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
"No more Batman! Vengeance. I am the Knight, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out."
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.